Warning. The following episode contains subject matter and scenes that some viewers may find upsetting, disturbing, or unnerving. Please note viewer discretion is advised at all times. Sit back and enjoy.
Welcome to Santa Cruz, a peaceful and picturesque little beach town right on the crest of California. Famed for our sun, sea, and surf, we are also immensely proud to be the brand new home of the University of California, which is currently attracting more and more diverse, forward-thinking, and spirited young students from all over the country, every single year. With a vibrant nightlife, white sandy beaches, decadent mountain trails, and colorful countrysides, we truly have something to offer everyone. So, why not pay us a visit sometime and get caught up in the magic of the Santa Cruz sunshine? But, and I must stress this, please remember to never accept a ride from a stranger.
Hello and welcome back to our Good Murderer podcast. I'm Tom and I'm joined again by Ben.
Again and again and again.
And again.
How's it going?
You're not bad, Ben. I'm still feeling pretty good.
A whole season you sat next to me.
I've managed to get through it. And I'd like to thank people who watch, people who private message me and support me throughout this time.
Is there a lot of that?
Lots of it. Fair play to you, mate. And I'm like, cheers. How you doing?
Yeah, not so bad. We made it. Season finale. Series finale.
So it's probably news to the viewers, the listeners. This is the last episode of the series, the sixth episode, and we're going to end it with a bang.
Yeah, I was so excited that we were covering this case that I forgot.
Sure, that's the lights now.
What about that was all right, that. And I was so excited, Tom, that we were covering this particular case today, that I forgot to put my black bins out.
Whoa, that must be Once again, a huge thank you to everyone who's listened, who's watched, who's shared, who's liked, any commented, all those things. We've been blown away by the support and the general good vibes everyone's given the show.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, we started off with episode 1. You caught me out with me saying I wanted to be binged. We now have 6 episodes for you guys, all touching on the hour mark. So, just while we have this little break, have a little binge.
6 hours of content. I mean, that's 4 rom-coms.
I mean, and for me, true crime obviously best enjoyed just before bed or a lazy weekend. But there's 6 hours. You choose what you do with them. If you want to listen to us at midday, go ahead.
That's nice of you, Ben, to let them do
Thank you. No, honestly, seriously.
And of course, we'll be back strong with season 2. We're not too sure the exact date we're coming back yet, but we'll be posting it all on our socials when we do know. But Ben, let's get into today's case. This is one that I've known you've been very, very keen. You've kind of led the way more on this one than I have in terms of picking it. What was it in particular that led you to Ed Kemper?
Mr. Ed Kemper, a.k.a. the co-ed killer, a.k.a. the co-ed butcher, a.k.a. not so often, the ogre of Santa Cruz.
Has he ever... Fair enough.
There you go. So the reason we wanted to cover Kemper, I mean, he's had much more of a spotlight shone on him via the fantastic Netflix series Mindhunter.
I mean, guilty. That's how I know him.
Yeah.
Take me away.
Lock him up. Throw away the key.
Don't. Because we've got to do the episode. So that'll be stupid. Yeah, I saw him in Mindhunter. Don't touch that. I saw him in Mindhunter, and the actor playing him was amazing. Yeah. And ever since then, I've looked into more bits of him, and he's a very intriguing character, old Ed.
For me, I was fascinated by Kemper going back, maybe 10 years? I was...
Never mentioned him.
Oh, it was not an easy
10
guy
years
to
ago.
Bring up, yeah. I think if I log into my old YouTube account, I'll see my previously watches, and Kemper will feature prominently. I'm not bragging.
I just didn't know you were into true crime 10 years ago.
I told you I was looking at underground stuff, indie crimes, feeling things out, and, not feeling things out, but Kemper's been on my radar for quite some time, Tom. My fascination with him is, and there's two Bens that are going to feature in this episode. So if you could kind of split me up or hold me back when possible, I'd really appreciate it. So one Ben has a soft spot for Kemper, and he absolutely shouldn't have a soft spot for him.
There's been a few comments in the other episodes of you kind of having a soft spot for killers, soft spots.
Yeah, I didn't see these comments.
Your mum said it.
She didn't comment it.
She did to me.
Anyway, the intrigue with Kemper, absolute giant of a man, 6'9", incredibly articulate, has an IQ of 145, which is just insane. But the intrigue with me is the fact that he's turned himself in, which we'll go into some more detail on shortly. But he's very eloquent in the way that he self-analyzes himself, almost self-diagnoses himself as you view these interviews, all of which are available on YouTube. There are tons of them, tons of different interviews. He's been incarcerated for 40-odd, 50-odd years now.
Yeah, some very good documentaries with the policemen who actually caught him and, were friendly with him, which we'll get into.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly. He's very, very likable. He's mild-mannered. He's friendly. He's smart. He's intelligent. He's got quite a dry sense of humor, which obviously I'm into.
Obviously.
So he was a big name, and that's why we've kind of saved him to go out, to conclude season 1 with. So Big Ed.
I think he's a big name, but for a lot of people, they know him, but they don't know a lot about him. So I think this will be a good episode to kind of just get people, get people aware exactly the kind of his story.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big old dive. As far as our dives have gone so far, this is
like if you're in the sea, Mariana's Trench.
Oh, lengthy lengths, deeply depths.
What the hell are you talking?
Just trying to stay positive.
Okay, Ben, for the last time of series 1, can you please set the scene?
Let's do it.
The year is 1973. It's dawn. A 6'9" shadow silhouettes underneath misty streetlights by a gas station in Pueblo, Colorado. The weary figure of a tall man casts itself back and forward as he paces up and down the rocky roadside. He has just spent the last 48 hours and almost 1,500 miles driving non-stop from the seaside town of Santa Cruz, California, functioning only on the caffeine pills he's consumed. The giant of a man is close to collapse. Physically, emotionally, mentally. He checks his car radio again and again, switching stations back and forth, waiting to hear his story break the news. Nothing is reported, nothing is revealed. His heart still racing, he makes his way into a phone booth. Spilling his heart to the answering detective, his confessions are met with disregard and disbelief. He is told to call back at a more appropriate hour. Dawn turns to daylight and he makes a second call, this time reaching his friend, Detective Jim Connor. Again, he spills his heart, calling for help and unloading his confessions. In shock, the Santa Cruz Police Department follow up his confessions. Bewildered and in disbelief, the gentle giant has led them straight to 2 dead bodies in his house, with many more to follow. Big Ed, as he is affectionately known, now reveals himself to be the co-ed killer.
Oh, that was intense, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
But when you said Big Ed, you weren't talking about 90 Day Fiance Big Ed.
Well, necks are a running theme in this case, and Kemper would have had no chance with him.
I don't think, even though Ed Kemper is a very clever man, I'm not sure he would know what to make of other Big Ed.
Yeah.
I'd love to see a twin-style movie with Big Ed and Big Ed.
That would work. That would be beautiful, and I think it would probably be to scale.
Big Eds. The Big Eds, they could call it.
Cruising around. Oh, well, causing mischief.
As we mentioned, we've deep dived on Kemper with this, and there's lots and lots and lots of information. So what we're going to do is we're going to start from the very beginning to see how we got to the stage where he was calling the police and handing himself in.
I think it's important to bear in mind we are going to go right from birth all the way through his childhood, adulthood. There's a lot of information here, but you will quickly start to notice that, some people say, are they born to kill? Were they formed to kill? I have my opinion that he was absolutely formed to kill.
Okay.
But, let's go through it. Let's crack on. So, December 18th, 1948, Edmund Emil Kemper III is born in Burbank, California. He is the middle of 3 children, and he has a younger and older sister. Son to Clarnell Elizabeth Kemper
and his father, Edmund Emil Kemper II. Now, his father was a World War II veteran who, from returning from the war, went on to become a nuclear weapons tester over in the Pacific Proving Grounds before returning to California, where he worked as an electrician. Now, Kemper had a very close relationship with his dad, loved his dads to bit, shared the same name, the second and the third. Also, obviously, the grandfather, who we'll go into some more detail on shortly, was Edmund Emil Kemper I, or just Ed. Just Ed. Yeah. So Kemper's mum, Clarnell, by all accounts, was not a very nice lady, and both Eds in the house repeatedly kind of had run-ins with her, to the point where the dad actually compared his time spent during the war and his time on nuclear weapons sites as, a better place to be rather than being with her. So he actually said suicide missions in wartime and the atomic bomb testing were nothing compared to living with that woman. He also went on to say that Clarnell affected him more than 396 days of fighting on the front line did.
Wow.
Powerful words. So you can only imagine the type of lady that she was.
I mean, from that as well, that as a kind of, in the heat of an argument, that as an insult, he seems to be fairly, clever as well.
Yeah, well, there you go. That could be where he gets it.
Away
with words, yeah.
Winter 1957, Ed Kemper's very upset because his parents are splitting up. He's very, very close to his father, and obviously we've already heard that living with his mum has been hellish, and his dad's leaving and he's been left with his mum. And with the divorce, Ed has to move his mum to Helena, Montana, and at this stage his mum's very unstable and she's actually an alcoholic. She would frequently belittle Ed, she would abuse him, she would often make him sleep downstairs in the basement in fear that it would harm his sisters, which, I mean, he must have some kind of traits unless she's just randomly thinking that he's going to hurt the...
I think size may be a consideration. He's a big lad, but also, she had, from what we've read about her, she seems to have something against males. She seems to also have something against, obviously, the father, or her ex-husband, sorry.
Yeah.
So maybe she associates baby Ed or childhood 8-year-old Ed as a reminder of her ex-husband. But either way, she's sending him down in a dark basement. He's scared of the dark at that age. And Kemper would go on to claim that he could hear rats moving about and rustling about.
Kemper would later on describe that experience as if he was descending to hell and his sisters were going to heaven, and he had a furnace down there which would burn bright at night, and he'd always associate that in his mind as that was the separation. And his mum would also mock him when he was 15 because he was 6'4", which quite brave thing to, big lad,
that's something to be proud of at that age.
Yeah,
sign him up,
celebrate it. But then, and also she said she wouldn't show him a lot of love in fear that it would turn him gay, which is absolutely absurd. She would constantly say Ed was a reminder of his father. I mean, you named him after his dad, so. And no woman or girl would ever love him. It was later postulated that Kemper's mother had borderline personality disorder, which, from that is fairly clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so summer 1959, Kemper is now 10, and he begins to show signs of antisocial behaviour. And the first real notice of this is cruelty to animals.
It's always a red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. An early warning sign for someone that might go on to do something then to humans. Kemper buries the family cat alive, waits for it to die. He then digs up the corpse of the cat and decapitates it. Kemper would go on to say that he was very proud of how he lied about this act and that the cat had just disappeared, but he would also say the reason that he did this to the cat was that the cat was shown more love and affection by the family, by his two sisters and his mother, than he was ever shown.
I think as well, Ben, he also mounted the head on a spike. In spring 1962, 13-year-old Kemper kills another family cat. This time he says it's because the cat was showing more favour to one of his sisters. This is a cycle already. You can see the jealousy and rage he has within him. This time he doesn't just bury it, he actually cuts it to pieces, keeps it in his wardrobe where his mother would eventually find it.
So not quite a copycat killing.
Oh.
During this time, he also exhibited some other strange behaviour, including taking one of his sister's toy dolls and kind of tearing the limbs apart, tearing the head off. But I did read in one of the transcripts that we're looking into, and it was a deep dive there. We'll go into that in some more detail. But he claims that this was in retaliation to her breaking his cap gun that he got from a trip to New York.
Well, I kind of think killing a cat, yeah, massive red flag. breaking your sister's doll. It's not.
It happens. Sibling fight.
Well, it doesn't. Yeah, it does. That doesn't. Well, I wouldn't be like worried if I had a son who did that. I wouldn't be like, oh my god, he's.
Well, I did something awful to my brother. Not that awful, but I put my foot through his toy wrestling ring in retaliation for him throwing my remote-controlled racing car on the garage.
So you could get it back.
Couldn't get up there. I couldn't. It wouldn't.
I think you're out of order. Also, a very strange quote from this time was a 13-year-old Kemper said, "If I kiss her, I'd have to kill her first." And that was talking about one of his teachers. So, the thought in his head, the thoughts going around his head are just very disturbing at this very early age.
Yeah, so in that household, obviously, two sisters, one younger, one older, and his mother. So it's a very female-dominant household. They were making fun of Ed because I think there was a teacher's birthday or something like that, and they were all kissing her on the cheek, but Ed was the only one in the classroom that refused to do this. Obviously, word got back to the sisters, and again, they ended up calling him gay and making fun of him for not doing it. But again, to say, and if I kiss her, I have to kill her.
Yeah, it's very odd. And also,
another flag.
He also snuck out of his house with his father's bayonet and would watch his second grade teacher through her windows, which...
With a bayonet in hand.
Yeah.
The same year, summer of 1962, 13-year-old Kemper actually has two near-death experiences. Once when his older sister tried to push him in front of a moving train.
Whoa.
Yeah, so again, we go back to the female-dominant household. They're teasing him. They're now pushing him onto train tracks.
Okay, yeah.
So luckily he was able to get back off the tracks before the train got there. The second time, again, it's his older sister, but she pushed Ed into the deep end of a swimming pool, knowing that he couldn't swim, which resulted in Kemper almost drowning. A lifeguard actually had to save him.
You just stand up. He's
6 foot now. Yeah, by that age, yeah, could have done. I mean, stop kicking, stop paddling, and just stand up.
Even though he had a very combative relationship with his sisters, he would also play some family games with them. You know, the kind of normal family games you play, or hide and seek, or electric chair and gas chamber were the games that he played with his younger sister. Which, I mean, that house in electric chair. His sister would tie him up and flip an imaginary switch, and he would tumble over and writhe in pain from electrocution, or simulate choking on gas.
Autumn 1963, the very next year, Kemper runs away from home. He decides enough is enough and tries to reconcile with his father. His father's actually over in Van Nuys, California. So I had a little look at this. It is a 1,180-mile journey. So how he did this, I couldn't find how he did this, but I've broken it down for those that are interested in geography.
Tell me more about the bins.
It would take 17 hours by car, 2.5 days by train. Slow train, probably the one that Kemper nearly got pushed in front of by the sounds of it, or 363 hours by foot. However he managed to get there, he got there, because by the time he got there, he discovered that his father had remarried and actually had a stepson.
Was the stepson called Ed?
He wasn't. I couldn't find...
So he could be called Ed. Well, it could be.
Let's not rule it out. Let's not rule it out.
That's what I'm saying, just don't rule it out.
That would be a kick in the teeth, wouldn't it?
And if he was called Ed 2.5, just to mug him off.
Yeah.
Who knows? His dad didn't just kick him out. He let him stay for a short period of time, and they sent him off to live with his paternal grandparents. I'm sure his dad knew what his mother could be like and was like, I'm not going to send him back there, but I'll send him over to the grandparents.
But at the same time, I don't really want him.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it?
Kemper, it's very much a one-way bond from what I'm reading. Dad's moved, first of all, when they divorced, which I understand, but then he's travelled all that way, and it's a distance.
Yeah.
And he spent a short while with him, and the dad decides...
But as well, twist it on the head. Ed is currently killing cats, doing all these things. It's like him turning up. It's like, as well with your new son, maybe you don't feel safe with having him around him.
Yeah, you should have seen what he did to his stepson's Action Man.
Kemper hated the idea of living with his grandparents. He later described his grandfather as senile and his grandmother as constantly emasculating me and my grandfather. On August 27th, 1964, age 15, Kemper is sat at the kitchen table with his grandmother called Maud Matilda Huey Kemper.
Maud, Matilda, Huey, Kemper.
What tune's that?
It's trying to be a football song. Didn't work.
Okay. Where they have a big heated argument, and this results in Kemper storming off, and she's just sitting there. I imagine she's quite smug with the fact that he's stormed off. When Kemper returns, he returns armed with a rifle. It's a rifle that his grandfather gave to him when they went hunting, and he shoots his grandmother in the head.
Point blank, yeah.
And then 2 shots in the back, to be sure.
Now, it's alleged, based on the post-mortem, that as well as shooting her dead, there were some stab wounds found in her body. So it's alleged that after she'd passed away, Kemper then proceeds to stab her corpse multiple times. He's claimed his first human kill, his grandmother, and at the time, his grandfather, who he had slightly more affection for, returns from grocery shopping. Now, Ed, not wanting his grandfather to go through the pain and the emotional distress of finding his soulmate of 50 years, although she sounded like she was quite nasty to him, belittling him, but his wife of 50 years, to find her dead, Kemper approaches the car as he returns from grocery shopping and again fires bullets into him at point blank range.
I kind of feel this is a sign of him trying to justify, I'm going to spare his feelings by killing him. It's not really something that's going to wash. And when you listen to his interviews and he's so softly spoken, you may go, oh, that's a nice reason for killing someone.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not really buying it.
Another reason we can explore is that he wanted to do this as a way. Obviously, he'd been made very angry by whatever his grandmother had done to him, but also as a way that he was proving to his parents, if they don't want him, you're not going to send me anywhere. And he was doing it in retaliation.
True.
To having been sent there.
Yeah, and especially to his father who sent him there, and his dad's parents. I mean, yeah, that's very, very dark.
Exactly. So Kemper, it's quite a remote area that his grandparents were living. It's a countryside house where he's killed them both. So there's no one that's witnessed this. He panics. He phones his mother, of all people, explains what's happened. She advises that he, I don't know what her initial reaction was, but she advises Ed, call the police and wait. Which he does.
I mean, he does that in your monologue. He's learned behaviour is, I've done something wrong, I'll call the police. He waits to be collected by the police, and after that he's claimed to have said, I just wanted to see what it felt like to kill Grandma. Oh. Which sounds like a little Red Riding Hood. How big are your teeth, Grandma? Taste lead, Grandma!
So Kemper is arrested. He's diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic, and he is sent to Atascadero State Hospital, which is a maximum security facility for mentally ill convicts. So with Atascadero, and if we're pronouncing that wrong for our American viewers, I do apologize. It's actually a facility. It's more kind of hospital-based for mentally ill people, but it's for adult and children.
Oh, okay.
Or adult and transitional age groups. So he's
juveniles.
Juveniles, exactly. Yeah. So he's a big guy, but he's now going into, as a 15-year-old guy, an environment where there are, mentally ill adults.
He's a big fish going into a big pond.
Yeah.
So on December 18th, 1969, it was Ed Kemper's birthday, his 21st birthday, and he was actually released.
Couldn't have wished for a better present, could he?
Exactly, but he was released back to his mother. Which psychiatrists said that wasn't a wise idea. And I thought, they're probably the ones to know.
Yeah, but what other options did they have? I guess the dad's already said, put some distance there. And then obviously
the grandparents,
didn't work out so well when they sent him to his grandparents. So maybe they didn't trust the father's judgment after...
Yeah, that is that is true. I mean, he endeared himself to the psychiatrists. As we said, like later on in life, we've seen in interviews, he's quite charming, he's quite likable. I mean, a lot of these people are, like we go back to all these other people we've covered, they all seem to have that charm about them, even if they are evil.
So he's really endeared himself to everybody, the psychiatric team, the guards. He's viewed as a model prisoner, and he's getting on so well that he's actually trained up to administer psychiatric evaluations to other inmates in the hospital, if you could believe that much.
Yeah, and it's been assumed that he learned a lot from these people as well. Like he learned from these sex offenders and probably people who are older than him. I think as well, it might be in the doctor's mind, the fact that he went in there at a young age of 15, that maybe they were able to mold him. They thought,
like he's not a lost cause.
No, we can make this kid right. So yeah, I mean, they obviously they knew about his high IQ and everything like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's been released.
So yeah, I mean, during the time that he was at Atascadero, he did complete 2 IQ tests. The first one coming in at 136, which is over 2 standard deviations above the average. And then the second one came in at 145, as we mentioned earlier, which is just incredibly smart, incredibly intelligent. He admitted that he learned a lot from other sex offenders when conducting these psychiatric tests on them. A few different techniques, if you will. For example, the best way to get away with raping someone is to kill them, because that does not leave a witness.
Yeah.
Kemper also claimed that during these evaluations, obviously he wasn't just administering them, but he was completing them himself, and he learned how to manipulate psychiatrists.
So Kemper is now out. It's 3 years later. He's living with his mother. Not a big shock. It's a highly toxic environment. His mother is now an alcoholic. She's unable to physically abuse Ed now, but she's verbally abusing him. He's 6'9" now.
Yeah,
so he is
big guy. It's important to note as well, in the years while Ed was incarcerated, his mother did try to remarry twice, but they both kind of dissolved quite quickly. So these guys were not buying into her, and they got out of there quite quickly.
Yeah, I guess that will make her a lot more bitter and a lot more hateful. He wasn't forced to live in the basement, but also at this point, Kemper's getting a taste for alcohol himself. He's going to the jury room, which is a local police hangout. He's also a big fan of police shows, and he gets a real buzz from talking to the policeman. I think as well, him knowing in the back of his head what the crimes he's committed, kind of feels like maybe he's infiltrating and learning bits here.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously he's had 5 years in that secure facility where he's learned all these different evaluation techniques, all these different kind of common traits, and maybe a few tips, tricks.
This is where he becomes known as Big Ed, a self-described friendly nuisance.
According to regulars at the jury room, he was a likable guy with a great personality. He would talk with police about what was going on in the area and offer tips and solutions. He was a very, very likable, friendly, outgoing guy, and was often described as a gentle giant. Some of the regular coppers drinking in the jury room also referred to him as a police groupie.
He did hope to become a police officer, but he was turned down because of his size.
Yeah, unbelievable reason. You'd think the bigger the better, kind of like a bouncer. But apparently it was because it was a state trooper position and he was too big for the motorbike.
Okay, wow. I mean, I've seen those 2 fat twins on a motorbike. And if they can take it, Big Ed.
But I don't think they were, chasing down criminals at the time. I'd watch it if they were, I tell you that much.
Yeah,
but,
that is fair.
Yeah.
So November 29th, 1972, Kemper's juvenile records were permanently expunged.
Articulate Ed Kemper would probably be able to define that really well for us, but essentially that means that they've been removed from the records completely eradicated. He's out of prison. He's made a few copper mates, a bit like you, copper mates. Yeah. He meets a student at a Santa Cruz beach. Not often talked about this, but he actually ends up becoming engaged with her the following year.
I didn't know that.
So there's a reason that you might not have heard of it. What is due to follow, and what we're about to cover. As a result, his fiance's parents requested that her name not to be revealed to the public.
That's very thoughtful.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, because I mean, the amount of documentaries there are about him, I'm sure that she would have been absolutely hounded the whole time.
By being associated with him.
So yeah, well done, parents. I mean, it's very rare we get to say well done to the parents in these podcasts. So we'll tip the little hat there. So the same year, Kemper gets a job working on the highway division, which is basically maintaining, fixing highways.
Kemper did pick up a nickname. He was called the Forklift. And this is because of his ability to carry 2 92-pound sacks of cement above his shoulders. So obviously, to reiterate his power, his force, his strength, his size, he was called Forklift.
He gets hit by a car and he gets $15,000 settlement, which nowadays is worth almost $100,000. So that's a lot of money to get. And with that money, he uses it to move out of his mother's house. He uses it to buy a certain car.
Yeah, a 1969 Ford Galaxy, which will feature prominently moving forward. Kemper finds that escapism almost in this car, so he absolutely loves just driving around in his car. Potentially it's because, while driving, he's not going home to his mum's, he's not going back to, an empty apartment. He's just truly at peace.
Well, he said he loved driving when he was a kid. And then obviously that was taken away from him when he was away, locked away. So he used his time to drive around and also just to kind of experience and witness kind of things that he felt like he missed out on.
So in doing this and in spending a lot of time on the road, Kemper starts to notice a lot of student hitchhikers in the area, a suspiciously high number of hitchhikers apparently across the Santa Cruz area. He begins storing plastic bags, ropes, knives, blankets and handcuffs in his car. So that's quite an escalation.
Yeah, it seems to be an odd I mean, he seems to be fairly getting his life back together. He's just got the money, he's got the car, he's got a fiance, he's got an apartment. It's kind of, there's a lot of hitchhikers around here. Let's fill the car up with weapons.
Yeah, everything's coming up Ed, and he opts to kind of store a bit of a murder kit in his car.
So with this suspicious amount of hitchhikers around, he starts picking up young women and dropping off at their destination. According to Kemper, he did this 150 times before he started feeling homicidal sexual urges, which he called little zapples.
The urge is growing, and they escalate to murderous grapples.
How'd you like them zapples?
Literally.
How'd you like them zapples? Not very much, Ed. May 7th, 1972, Kemper picks up two 18-year-old students from Fresno State University, Marianne Pesch and Anita Lucchesa.
He offers to take them to Stanford University, which is almost 2 hours away. That's a very generous lift off.
I guess the hitchhiker doesn't know where he's going, so they're not thinking it's weird. He's probably thinking, if I...
2 hour jet, I've got them for 2 hours.
Yeah, I've got 2 hours to act, and also probably, can get far away from my hometown.
Yeah, allows a bit more scope for options of his route. After driving for an hour, Kemper reaches a secluded wooded area near Alameda, California, with which he was familiar with due to his work on the Highway Division. He handcuffs Pesch and locks Lucchesa in the trunk. He then stabbed and strangled Pesch to death and proceeded to kill Lucchesa in a very similar fashion. Kemper later stated that while handcuffing Pesch, he accidentally brushed the back of his hand against her breast and said, "Whoops, I'm sorry," after grazing her breast despite murdering her minutes later.
It's just a bit of insight, like he just seems very calm. I mean, even in Mindhunter, that's that scene where he's very calm and instantly he turns. I think it just makes him a bit more...
Very apologetic. It's like that time I apologised to my Roomba vacuum for walking in front of it. Kind of similar, but different.
Saying thank you to a cash machine.
Yes, yeah.
Kemper puts the bodies in his trunk and makes his way back to his apartment. On the way back, he is stopped by the police because of his broken tail light.
Yep, so this is scenario number 1 when Ed Kemper could have been stopped, could have been discovered.
So broken tail light, they've stopped him for that and they've just given him a warning. I mean, you're not going to go, broken tail light, let's see in your boot.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like...
That's true, yeah. But I don't know if it was, because he stabbed and strangled these girls. I don't know if it's a bit of a bloody scene, if there's, he's cleaned up afterwards, I don't know. He's slightly out of the circumference of where people may, the police force may be more familiar with him from the jury in. The jury in. I mean, obviously, the jury room.
If there was any blood...
Jury's in, can you imagine?
If there was any blood in there, they're going to look in it. So he must have... I think as well, he stabbed them not in the car, didn't he? It was out of the car.
I believe it was outside of the car.
Yes.
But still, he's putting bloody corpses in his boot. You never know, a bit of drip or whatever. But in any case, it's just... And again, he could freak out at this time. He's just killed... well, not for the first time, his grandparents, obviously, but he's just killed his first non-related victims.
Yep.
He could freak out at being stopped. He could think he's being pulled over for the murders straight away.
He gets the corpses to his apartment. His roommate isn't in, luckily. And then he takes photos of their nude corpses and proceeds to have sexual intercourse with both of them. And then he dismembers them and he disposes their body parts in plastic bags across Loma Prieta Mountain.
Yes, so again, we talk about what he does to his victims once he has and control is a big thing for him. He's never had control over anything in his life up till this point. Now, once he's killed the victims, he wants to do that as quickly as possible so that he can then get them to this state, which is disgusting, it's horrifying, and unfortunately there is more to come. Another notable point is that we talked about Kemper working for the highway service and having the accident where he got a nice little settlement fee. He actually killed his first 2 victims with a completely shattered left arm that was in a cast at the time. So just to reiterate his size, his power, he was able to kill both victims, move their bodies, decapitate them, dismember them, all with only one hand.
September 14th, 1972, Kemper picks up 15-year-old dance student Aiko Ku, who decided to hitchhike to a dance class after missing her bus. Now, again, I went through the transcript of one of Kemper's more recent parole hearings. It's a fascinating read if you've got time like me. The reason why her age is slightly lower compared to the rest of the victims is because she gave Kemper the impression that she was a student at Berkeley. So he was under the impression she was kind of 18, 19-year-olds.
Okay.
She's not. She's 15. She's missed her bus. She's looking for a lift to get to her dance class. Apparently a very talented dancer. Kemper again drives to a remote wooded area where he pulls a gun on Ku before accidentally locking himself out of his car. So how that happens...
Yeah, I mean, that's a rookie mistake. I mean, he's still... not new to this, he's already killed 4 people, but he somehow manages, she lets him back in the car.
Yeah, so apparently he'd already had her at gunpoint before getting out the car. I assume that maybe he'd got out the car to try and come round and get her out of the car. He's got out, the car's locked, whether it's her or himself locking himself out, I don't know. He's panicking, but apparently he had built enough trust with her that she allowed him back in the car.
Yeah.
So she unlocks the door, Kemper gets in, chokes her to an unconscious state, rapes her, and kills her. So this is an interesting one. She is unconscious, but this is the first person and only person that he rapes while alive.
But the thing about her letting him in, he did have a gun in his hand. So...
That's true.
I mean, I could kind of see why he did that. Anyway, he put the body in the trunk and he drove to a bar to have a few drinks. He later would admit to going back to the trunk of his car after having a few drinks and marring the body like a fisherman would his catch. He takes the body back to his apartment again. Luckily, the flatmate isn't in again, and he...
He's had quite a bit of luck there as well.
Yeah, he dismembers...
I don't know what the flatmate does.
He has sex with the corpse, dismembers and disposes of the remains in a similar way to the first 2 victims.
January 7th, 1973, we move into the second calendar year of Kemper's spree. Now, Kemper at this time has opted to move back in with his mother, so I don't know if he's ran out of that kind of settlement fee cash that he was burning. But anyway, he's moved back in with his mum. Again, it's a very toxic environment for him. He has an argument with his mum, decides to go out and have a drive, but this time he's driving and he's on the lookout for his next victim.
Yeah.
This is where he picks up 18-year-old Cindy Schall. He drives her again to a remote wooded area and shoots her in the head with a pistol. He then puts her body in the trunk of his car and drives back to his mother's house, where he places the corpse in his bedroom closet.
He leaves it there overnight, waits for his mother to go to work the next day, removes the bullet from the corpse, and then proceeds to have sex with the corpse.
He then dismembers and decapitates her in his mother's bathtub. And again, it's insinuated afterwards that he did that, in his mother's house as a way of kind of retaliating to all of his mother's misdoings to him over the years. So Kemper decapitates her in his mother's bathtub. He then disposes the body parts by throwing them off a cliff. However, he keeps hold of the head for several days, regularly engaging in irrumatio. Please don't Google that word if you are intrigued. It's not worth it.
He eventually buries his head in his mother's backyard, which, again, I guess that's a sign of
it's like a territory thing almost.
Yeah, it's an FU to his mum as well.
Yeah.
February 5th, 1973, Kemper has a heated argument with his mother and left his house in search of a possible victim. So seems to be getting a bit of a pattern here. He's getting raised with his mother, then head out and look for the kill. With heightened suspicion of a serial killer preying on the hitchhikers in the Santa Cruz area, students are advised only to accept rides from cars with university stickers on them.
Having moved back in with his mum, she also worked at the university. He was happy to place one of her employee stickers on the bumper of his car. So he was obviously privy to that information and watching the news, kind of tracking what was going on. He was drinking down at the jury room, so again getting kind of insider information from all his copper buddies, and places that sticker on. And again,
So he then picks up 23-year-old Rosalind Thorpe and 20-year-old Alice Lou. According to Kemper, Thorpe entered the car first and reassured Lou to enter. He drove a short distance before fatally shooting both. He again takes the bodies to his mother's house, this time beheading them in the car and carrying the headless bodies into their mother's house, proceeding to have sexual intercourse. He then dismembered the bodies and removed the bullets to prevent identification.
The next morning, he discarded their remains at Eden Canyon. Now, when questioned in an interview as to why he decapitated his victims, it would be a trend, a kind of a signature of the co-ed killer or the co-ed butcher. Kemper explained the head trip fantasies were a bit like a trophy. The head is where everything is at. The brain, the eyes, the mouth, that's the person. I remember being told as a kid, you cut off the head and the body dies. Well, that's not quite true. There's a lot left in the girl's body without the head, which is...
It's very, very eerie. I mean, some of the stuff he said just sounds like a horror B movie. Like,
yeah,
take the head off and then the body dies.
Or he's approaching it as a professional butcher. Like the way they approach cutting the head off a chicken.
A professional butcher. Yeah, so would you want a chicken? Yeah, when you cut the head off of the chicken, it dies, by the way. Do you still want it? Yes, I want a live chicken. What do you want?
Too late. So that brings us to April 20th, 1973, the final victims. So, after drunkenly coming home from a party, Kemper's 52-year-old mother makes her way back into the house. Now, in doing so, she wakes up a 6'9", we'll repeat his height again, sleeping Ed Kemper.
Sleeping giant,
snoozing away, slumbering giant. Kemper decides to just check in on her, so he pops upstairs to her bedroom, where he finds her sitting on the bed reading a magazine or reading a novel. So she finds him standing there in her doorway, and this is kind of a snidey comment. She says, "Oh, I suppose you're going to want to sit up and talk all night, aren't you?" Yeah,
which is a weird insult. And I would have thought Ed's never really wanted to do that with his mum, because she's always been horrible to him. And that's wasn't the wisest way to treat him at this point, was it, Ben?
Yeah, that's the bizarre trigger point. So Kemper softly replies, "No, good night," and goes back downstairs and proceeds to wait for her to fall asleep.
He waited for her to fall asleep, and he returned to the room and bludgeoned her with a claw hammer and slit her throat with a knife. So that's 3 family members he has killed.
Yeah. He subsequently decapitates his mum and engages in irrematio. Again, don't pop that in your Google machine. It's not worth it.
It's basically sex with the head. I mean, yeah.
Kemper claims that he then put her head on a shelf and screamed at it for hours. He then proceeds to throw darts at the head, as well as removing her tongue and tearing out her vocal cords.
He then puts them in a garbage disposal, and they think that he did this because of all the years of abuse of her, verbally abusing him. It's him blending these up, and it's his way of kind of like winning. Which and this whole thing he was doing it to completely humiliate her as well. This was all a sign of just going, "I've won," essentially.
So just like her ex-husband, just like the many men that she kind of befriended after divorcing, just like Ed, the garbage disposal couldn't take her vocal cords.
What happened?
It rejected them and they came back up through the sink. It couldn't actually break down his mother's vocal cords. So it's quite an ironic twist there. Thought you'd like that.
Yeah.
Kemper recalls that moment seemed very appropriate.
Kemper then put his mother's headless corpse into his closet and went for a drink at a nearby bar. He was getting a bit nervy at this point, thinking that he was going to be found out. He actually invites one of his mother's friends around for a movie.
Her very best friend. It's only Sally Hallett.
Sally Hallett. He thought Sally was most likely going to be the one that would come around and smell a rat. So he invited her around, and then he strangles her to death.
Yeah, and another interesting thing extracted from Kemper's most recent parole hearing transcript of 2017, he mentioned in killing his mother's friend Sally Hallett, he actually did this for revenge. It's alleged that it was also a possible motive to make it look like they just both went off on a vacation together.
Okay.
However, he says, no, I did that for revenge. And the reason I did that is that the two of them had agreed to spend a summer traveling over to Europe together. For 4 weeks, they were going to go and spend 2 weeks in England and 2 weeks in France. On the day that they were due to deposit for their trip, Sally backed out and really messed his mum around with the down payment. He then went on to say, "If my mother ever dies from the stuff I did, Sally is going with her. This is one trip she's not going to miss.
He does have a way with words.
Yeah, but interestingly then, he's doing that in retaliation for her upsetting his mother. So there is, amongst all the hate, there is some love for his mum.
So Kemper left a note for the police that read, approximately 5:15 a.m. Saturday. No need for her to suffer anymore at the hands of this horrible murderous butcher. It was quick, asleep, the way I wanted it. Not sloppy and incomplete, gents. Just a lack of time. I got things to do. So for a wordsmith, very wordy in the letter.
Yeah, not as eloquent as he normally is, but then again, I guess he's in a bit of a rush. He's in a bit of a panic, so maybe that's a one panicked Kemper.
It's like when you leave and you just leave a little post-it note on the wall.
Yeah. Or if you text while driving, which you shouldn't do, guys, you shouldn't do. Kemper then flees the scene and drives non-stop to Pueblo, Colorado. This is almost 1,500 miles away from the area of which he's just killed his mom and her best friend.
So like the monologue says, he gets there and he decides he's going to call the police and hand himself in, just like how his mother told him to do when he killed his grandparents.
Yeah, so this is a case full of patterns, disgusting patterns, but there's sequences and patterns. And again, this is at a time when serial killers were not a known thing.
No.
Kemper helped establish this as a theme, as a phrase, as a word. They were called sequence killers before Kemper. And again, you spot the sequences here, you spot the patterns, and there's a regular one running through. So he's arrived in Pueblo, Colorado. He's exhausted physically, emotionally, mentally, absolutely, close to collapse at this stage. He goes into a phone booth, picks up the phone, and the first call he makes to the Santa Monica Department of Justice is kind of almost laughed off. They don't take him seriously. He admits to killing his mum and her best friend, and that the bodies are in the house, and they tell him to call back at a more appropriate hour.
He self-described himself as a friendly nuisance to the police and the ones he's friends with. I mean, if they consider that's the kind of thing he does when mucking about, then So I mean,
killed my mum, killed her mate. They're upstairs in the wardrobe. One of them's not go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, Ed, stop mucking about.
That's so big, Ed.
Can you call back another time? Because we're actually really busy. We're trying to find this killer, the co-ed killer. Can you, can you call back tomorrow, Ed? I've had enough. Okay, I'll call back tomorrow.
And call back is what he did. So a few hours later, he calls back and specifically asks for Jim Connor, who he knows personally. He's confessed to Connor that he's killed his mum and Hallett, and wanted the police to go and see for themselves at his address. Which they do. He then waits for the police to arrive again, like Tom said, just like when he killed his grandparents. Kemper then also confessed to the murders of 6 students. This, as well as his grandparents, mother, and her best friend, takes Kemper's total victim count to 10. When asked why he turned himself in, Kemper said the original purpose was now gone, the original purpose being his mum. It wasn't serving any physical or real or emotional purpose. It was just a pure waste of time. Emotionally, I couldn't handle it much longer. I was emotionally and physically exhausted to the point of near collapse. I just said to hell with it and called it off.
Let's call the whole thing off. Cut the whole thing off.
It's funny you mentioned, obviously, the police kind of laughing him off, saying they're too busy. Well, there are actually 2 prominent serial killers on the scene the same time as Kemper, and one of them we'll get to know slightly more shortly. But there was also John Linley Frazier and Herbert Mullins on the scene, perpetuating their own crimes in the same area. Basically resulted in Santa Cruz receiving the anonymous nickname Murder Capital of the World.
Ah. There you go. I mean, it's Kemper, the way he talks, the way he looks, the way he speaks, how articulate he is. He does stand out in this world of serial killers.
It started with surrogates at a non-human level. Physical objects, my possessions, other people's, destruction of things that are cared about. And then destruction of things that are living on a lower level, small animals, insects, animals, and then finally people. I am an American. And I killed Americans. I am a human being, and I killed human beings. And I did it in my society.
But also just the fact that he handed himself in is a thing which is unheard of.
Well, that's it, yeah. So Manson, not quite the same level, but Manson was caught, arrested, imprisoned, passed away in prison. Dahmer, caught, imprisoned, murdered in prison. Bundy, caught, arrested, imprisoned, executed. Gacy, caught, arrested, in prison, executed. Kemper gave himself in, still alive today.
Anyway, so Kemper is indicted on 8 counts of first-degree murder. This does not include... He's not charged with his 2 grandparents because he's already served that time. So due to Kemper's explicit and detailed confession, his counsel's only option was to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. I mean, he's already served time in a unit for mental illness, so it's probably quite, that's where you would go with the...
Yeah, absolutely. And it's there was an interesting point made by real-life mindhunter, Detective John E. Douglas, who interviewed Kemper regularly after he is arrested, and he claims that with serial killers, or sequence killers at the time that they were known, it's like they have their own CD, to throw it back to the CD days, in their mind. And what you have to do is unlock it somehow and press play. So by asking the right questions. Now with Kemper, he said once you started playing that CD, you could not get it to stop.
That is a terrible metaphor.
Yeah.
Because it's like once you unlock it, unless the CD, okay, maybe this, you buy a CD from HMV back in the day, it has a security label on. So it's like, it's Kemper's mind is a security label. If I get past that, then I can listen to the CD. So they rip that off, not just unlock it.
But he did go on to say, a killer's accomplishment in life is that particular crime or crimes. You have to kind of turn on that CD. Once you turn it on, it's remarkable what they remember and what they recall. All the specifics. You really couldn't shut Kemper up. He is extremely bright. The detail that Kemper went into was incredible for that length and period of time. It sounds insane, but Kemper is not insane. If he was insane, we would have caught him and identified him a lot sooner. He gave himself to us. Also with it, the control thing about him giving himself up, it's kind of
it's in his own hands.
Well, he's kind of retiring the victor because he will never be caught because he was the one that gave himself up. It's like playing a FIFA tournament. We win one game, and then you're like, right, I'm done.
Yeah, it's not playing anyone else.
100% record. So
where's the snacks?
Kemper, the big old boy. So it's talking about snacks. I didn't know this. I'm just coming across the notes now. The cannibalism.
He would later take it back.
So he claimed at one point that
during the trial. I think this was along the lines of them trying to get him to make it like he sounded insane.
Okay, so try and make him sound insane. They said
I think we play on the lawyers as well, saying that plead guilty by reason of insanity.
Yeah.
What else can you do in that situation?
Yeah, so making a flesh casserole, which he's apparently said to try and push him towards the insanity bargain, I guess. But yeah, he later on recanted that. Flesh casserole.
Yeah.
While in custody, Kemper tries to commit suicide multiple times, but he is never successful, and his trial goes ahead on October 23rd, 1973. They found Kemper to be legally sane and fit for trial.
November 8th, 1973, just over 2 weeks after the trial started, the 6-man and 6-woman jury deliberated for 5 hours, declaring Kemper sane and guilty on all counts. Kemper asked for the death penalty.
Quite a specific one, as I recall. The old death by torture.
Which isn't a thing.
No.
Yeah, very odd and very sadistic way of wanting to go.
I think, is that something he says knowing that it's not going to happen, a bit of a macho?
Yeah.
However, capital punishment at the time in California had been halted. Kemper instead receives 7 years to life for each of the 8 counts of murder. He was sentenced to serve these concurrently at the California Medical Facility, where he remains today at the ripe old age of 71. He served some of his sentence at the same time as other notable California-based criminals, Charles Manson, and we mentioned him earlier, Herbert Mullen. Yes, they caught Herbert Mullen. Kemper showed a particular dislike for Mullen because Mullen committed his crimes at the same time and in the same area as Kemper. So again, it's not admiring his work, it's very much, he viewed him as a low-grade criminal.
He just says he's just a cold-blooded killer.
Yeah.
Killing everybody he saw for no good reason.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas Kemper, I guess, viewed himself as being a really established thought.
Well, like Kemper said, he picked his victims randomly.
Yeah.
So he's just picking them randomly. He's killing them essentially because he's in an argument with his mum.
Yeah. I mean, you sound a lot like Herbie Mullen, Kemper.
Sorry, Kemps.
You are a big lad, though, so I won't say it to your face. While imprisoned with Mullen, admits to manipulating and physically intimidating Mullen. So Mullen's over 1.5 feet shorter than Kemper. He's claimed that Mullen, who was pleading insane and playing up a little bit, used to sing all the time, no matter where he was. So Kemper threw cold water over him, and that immediately stopped him from singing. He would then, when he claims when Herbie is a good boy, he gets peanuts and gives him peanuts. He then went on to class this as behavior modification treatment.
Well, then he said pretty soon Herbie would ask his permission to sing.
There you go. So he's asserting his dominance.
It's like
Pavlovian conditioning.
Pavlovian conditioning.
You hear a bell, you get a treat.
Pavlov's dog.
Ding!
Peanut. So Kemper has remained in the California medical facility for 47 years so far.
That's a long time.
And he's remained a model prisoner.
Yeah.
On our Instagram, you might have seen the post we did not too long ago where it says, whilst being in prison, he's done multiple audiobooks.
Star Wars.
Star
Did
Wars?
some Star Wars, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
I heard him doing, and we'll find it, C-3PO's voice. And it was quite good.
Behave yourself, R2. You're going to get us into trouble.
A little bit of a peek behind the curtain. Once I made the image of the Kemper reading the book, I showed it to my fiance, and she asked me if that was my face. Going back to the recordings he did, Kemper in prison, he did over 5,000 hours worth of narration for audiobooks for the blind. He retired from these positions in 2015 after he experienced a stroke and was declared medically disabled.
Yeah, so during that 47-year period that we mentioned, he held multiple positions. He going back to his days in the previous hospital that he'd been in, the previous facility, he was in charge of scheduling other inmates' appointments with psychiatrists, which obviously he had experience with doing previously. He also found himself to be quite the craftsman of ceramic cups. And in one of the documentaries we watched, there was a very kind of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory looking cup with an apology glazed into it.
Remember what it said?
It said, "Oh, good God, I beg your pardon, I didn't promise a rose garden." So he actually sent that to one of the detectives that was a lead on the case by way of apology.
So in prison, he was the model inmate. He never once violated any rules until 2016 when he failed to provide a urine sample. I don't really know why. Who knows the reason why? But
well, he'd had a stroke. He'd become a bit of a diabetic, so maybe he was just not in the mood.
Yeah, I guess, but you'd probably allow. I don't know.
If that's one cross on a 47-year record. He seems like a bit of a control freak, perfectionist. Yeah. I can't see him doing that intentionally.
Yeah, he's been denied or waived over a dozen parole hearings while incarcerated and is next eligible in 2024, though it's alleged that Kemper is happy and plans on dying in prison.
Yeah, so the most recent parole hearing that he had, the transcript is available online. It's from 2017. It was fascinating. But we got some information that's not kind of readily available, in the ether about Kemper. Going back to the theme of control and kind of failure as a man as a possible motive. He didn't have many relationships. His mum convinced him that no woman or no girl would ever love him. Kemper has gone on to state that once I had them in the car, I wasn't going to let them out because I was tired of people walking out on me.
There's quite some incel vibes going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, that could go back to maybe his dad walking out on them, although they divorced and he relocated. We don't know a lot either.
Well, it's like a lot of these cases. It is the case of control and wanting to be in. If you kill someone, obviously you're dictating what happens from that point onward. But yeah, I mean, he just seems to have, like the question you said at the very beginning, was it a learnt behaviour? I think you're counting him a bit too much slack if you think that he was morphed in this way.
Well, yeah, I mean, he had an extremely dysfunctional childhood. He had
a mum he had a horrible mum.
Yeah,
his dad left.
Yeah.
It's like that. The fact that he starts like killing cats and stuff, I kind of feel like.
I mean, the warning signs were there. I agree, but I do think there's so much that's happened to him throughout his life that has pushed him to not act out, lash out. Ultimately, he's killed victims, and this is what I keep reminding myself when I find it, myself in those endearing moments. He's killed women, half his age, similar age to him at the time, quarter of his size, third of his size.
Yeah.
He's smothered them.
Yeah, it's cowardly. Yeah, I mean, a man of his size. I'm not saying he'd be much braver to kill other men, but it's essentially. The thought, he had a very difficult childhood. I'll never know the kind of pains and struggles he went through. His mother sounded like a nightmare. Mm-hmm. But I mean, he can't then go, oh, well,
Yeah. I mean, the only male he killed was his senile grandfather, and he shot him from behind.
Yeah.
So there you go. Kemper claimed frustration as a big motive for his crimes. He was frustrated that he couldn't do anything with his victims when they were alive, so he killed them to fulfill those desires.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he's saying. So I can't disagree with that being in his head. But at the same time, I mean, in all of this, I mean, the gagging order or wherever it was that his fiance's parents done has worked out absolutely blinder here because we've got nothing on her. But you had a fiance, so it's like, if anything, be a good fiance and don't be going out being jealous about not being able to spend time with a bunch of students. So it's. I'm not feeling sympathy for Kemper at all in any way. I mean, neither of us are, but it's just like I think he's very, because he is a wordsmith and he's got a lot of his little excuses he's using, and it's as if to go, oh, fair play. No, not fair play.
The psychology of Kemper is a fascinating one. So Kemper, when discussing his victims, states that my original intention was to make it very quick for them, for none of them to be aware of what was happening. Not to keep them from stopping the crime, it was to keep them from suffering. I have a real bad problem depriving people of their lives. It wasn't the aspect of killing them, it was the aspect of possessing their bodies afterwards. So it was almost, after the fact, evicting someone from their body. And I'm sorry it sounds so cold, but that's what it analogizes to.
Again, I think he's just trying to manipulate people in thinking that, oh, he didn't want to put them through pain. He wanted to do. He is taking their bodies. I know they're dead, which he's taking their bodies to his flat and doing all these terrible things to them. So it's like, I think he's manipulating through the transcripts.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair. Kemper's mother's house is still standing. I know he did some horrible things inside that house, buried bodies, body parts, in the garden as well, but it is still standing. It's in Aptos, California. 609 Ord Road, but it does appear on Google Maps, for any Google Maps fans, curious people out there, as 609 Harriet Avenue. Another little trick that we discovered is that once the girl was in the car with him, he would claim that they'd left their door unlocked, reached across, and as he pretended to shut the door properly, would drop a chapstick just behind the door handle, which basically blocked the door from opening. As well as this, when he did pull up, he would always, if they didn't get in the car straight away, kind of look at his watch, look back at them and go, act like a businessman, act like he's got somewhere to go. And he's, put some distance between himself and potentially the co-ed killer. Yeah, it
just kind of shows how calculated he was. And again, how manipulative he is. And he knows kind of exactly what the concerns people are going to be having. And he's able to ease their worries, essentially. So that is the case of Ed Kemper, the co-ed killer.
The Ogre of Santa Cruz.
And that's it for Series 1. Case closed. What a journey.
Yeah. So there are 6 episodes now. Please know that we'll be back shortly, with Season 2. We've already kind of thrown some ideas between us, splatting. Some are sticking, some aren't sticking, about which cases we're going to cover. So the ideas are already there. We'll be back. In the meantime, there's some bingeable content for you right now. There's 6 episodes, 6 hours, a few rom-coms worth of...
4 rom-coms worth. 4 football matches worth. Yeah, please enjoy, please share, please keep spreading the word. We really appreciate that. If you're listening to audio, please give us a review and subscribe. That really helps us out. It really spreads the name out there on the charts. People get to see it a lot more, gets more attention. If you've enjoyed the episode, give us a comment and like and subscribe.
And in the meantime, guys, as we said, the social media stuff will still be ongoing. We'll still have fresh content every day on Instagram, every day on Twitter. And if you're joining us via audio and just want to take a look, you're intrigued to see what we look like, pop over to YouTube. Come and have a look at us. There's some very fun visuals.
Yeah, there's a lot more visual content. There's, we have images of crime scenes. We have lots of different things on here. So it's always worth a little peep over here. Yeah. But thank you very much for sticking with us for this first series. We're going to be back and bigger than ever. And yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, we can't wait to be back for Season 2. See you guys soon.
We'll see you soon.
Will I touch you or?
No.
See you guys soon.